What's up, people? My name is Shaggy, the opinionated hippie, and today I'm going to be ranking my favorite Frank Zappa drummers. I have received a lot of comments over the years, literally suggesting this: rank the drummers, rank the bass players, rank the keyboardists, rank his sidemen or the people who have been in his band in general. So today we're going to tackle the drummers because that was kind of the easiest for me. I'm only doing the drummers who toured with Zappa. So if they played like a one-off show at some point, no, not doing like the Ensemble Moderne, like the Yellow Shark, any those drummers I'm not doing. Not doing anybody who like appeared on Lumpy Gravy and played the drums on that. Just the drummers who toured with Zappa. 9 of them, not doing the percussionists. So Ruth is not considered. Ed Mann, Arthur Tripp, Mundy, Billy Mundy, all the people who play percussion. I'm probably forgetting people from like the Wazoo tours. But anybody who was not the drummer, I'm not considering. That'll be a whole different list. These are just the 9 drummers. And it's my favorite. This is not a ranking of who was the best drummer. Because the person who I would argue was his best drummer is not number 1 on the list. And I mean technically the best drummer. The person the entire world is pretty much acknowledged is one of the greatest rock drummers of all time. He's not number 1 on this list because this is a list of my favorite. And I'm just noticing, so my kindergarten class cuts my hair every year. And man, it is growing straight up in weird ways from noticing that little weird thing right there. Anyways, what can you do about it? So that's it. So let's do this, man. This is the order of my favorite Zappa drummers. On to number 9. Number 9 is Jim Gordon. He'd be higher, but he killed his mother and he's in prison. So we got to penalize the guy for that. Schizophrenia, mental issues, drug issues. He had a problematic life, unfortunately. Incredibly talented drummer. If I didn't have to penalize him for murdering his mother, he might be higher on this list because the drums, he only played during the Wazoo tours. He did the Grand Wazoo and the Petit Wazoo. You can hear him on the releases. There are several releases from those tours. Fantastic, absolutely amazing, high energy. He had a weird phaser effect or some kind of effect that he used on the drums that brought this really neat, weird space sound to Frank's weird jazzy excursions of those 2 tours. But yeah, a really, really, really good drummer who unfortunately had a very problematic life. And so for that reason, you got to be number 9, Jim. You lost the right to be higher when you killed your mom. So anyways, yeah, so that sucks. But yeah, now on to number 8. Number 8, David Logeman. He was only on 1 or 2 tours, the spring and summer tour of 1980. I think there were a couple legs in that, maybe just one. I think there was a U.S. leg and a European leg. But we don't have much officially released from him, so we don't have a complete live show that's been released. I have heard many live shows. You can go on YouTube, and there's a really good Paris show that features Logeman that's out there. I even think there's a video of that show. But this tour was kind of primarily carried by like Arthur Barrow's bass and Tommy Mars on keyboards, and the drummer was just kind of there. Didn't seem to have much personality, didn't seem to bring anything particularly extra to the songs. He was a little stiff during the solos, and so I think Frank kind of just ran all over the place, all over him. There were some interesting moments. He wasn't in any way a bad drummer. Like, he's not like messing up on songs or doing anything like that. But I don't think there's anything about him that particularly stands out. And so he was just a really good drummer that played for Frank back in 1980. Appeared on a handful of tracks, appeared on the You Are What You Is album. But yeah, there's not much out there that we can point to him to say, hey, this is a really good example of him in the live setting. A lot of this is based on how drummers support Frank in his solos. That's what I'm looking for. But yeah, so yeah, number 8, David Logeman. Yeah, number 8, David Logeman. Number 7, Jimmy Carl Black, the Indian of the group. As much as I absolutely love this era of Frank, um, the drumming was definitely of a very repetitive, very locked into a very kind of, I don't want to say simple, but a groove that had very sort of dun 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 dun, dun, very short, repetitive rhythms that just kind of like stayed that way for long periods of time, during Frank solos, during horn solos. There's a lot going on with the drums during this era. You had, once they started touring, you had Mundy on percussion, you had Tripp on percussion. I cannot tell who is who at any given point, but Jimmy Carl Black definitely held the beat strong, influenced. They say that his sort of drumming style, at least the style that Frank had him play, again, what is Jimmy and what is Frank dictating what Jimmy plays. That's sort of the theme that will run through all of these. He provided that solid backbone that provided so many interesting moments for the mothers to jump off into like improv and stuff like that. But they were really, really repetitive, and they weren't exploratory or challenging Frank in ways that later drummers would. Love his energy, love his presence, love when he sings songs on like, Lonesome Cowboy or Harder Than Your Husband. Just an all around, just awesome individual. But as a drummer, he would fall all the way to number 7 for Frank. Jimmy Carl Black, number 7. Number 6, Chad Wackerman. He was the drummer in 81, 82, 84, and 88. And he's out there on a lot of things. I mean, you can hear him on the Halloween 81 shows, all the 88 stuff, the 84 releases, all over. You can't do that on stage anymore. And he is pretty much falls victim to the era in which he performed. I think the 84 tour was Frank's worst. I put it as Frank's worst. 88 was ultimately disappointing, and it was ultimately disappointing because of the solos. I think the arrangements overall, as I talk about this in the tour video of 88, had a Vegas sort of review type thing. Like, look, it's all of our hits through the ages and horn players and all that kind of stuff. It's a good tour. It's a fun tour. Yeah. And so Wackerman's drumming, I think the drummer I would compare him to most in sort of Frank's tour is Colaiuta, and that he's a very, very, very busy drummer. There's a lot going on with Wackerman, and he's phenomenal. If you listen to like the album Guitar in particular, which is nothing but just guitar solos, it's a couple instrumental tracks that are essentially guitar solo vehicles. But then it's just guitar solo, guitar solo, guitar solo. Wackerman is ridiculous. Him and Thunis, the bass player, are just absolutely phenomenal. But 84, that tour is almost a complete wash because he had complete electronic drum set, which was horrible. 88, he had, I'm sure, a mix of both. Again, there's a percussionist in 88, so I don't know what is man and what is Wackerman at all points in time. But again, I'm not sure I really liked his drum sound that much in 88. 81 and 82, he's absolutely ridiculous. And he's at the peak of his powers in those 2 years. But every other except for the next drummer on this list, the top 4 drummers on this list seem to bring not only their drum skills, but a whole bunch of like personality that sort of forced Frank to go in weird directions, either musically or with his guitar solos. And I'm not sure how much Wackerman pushed Frank. Frank seemed to be very much in his own, like, we're going to do these weird vamps. The solos are going to have no momentum once we get into them. There was a lot going on with Frank's solos in like the 80s. And Wackerman, of course, adapted to all of Frank's demands incredibly well, incredibly technical, talented drummer. But I'm not sure what his personality is. Like, I'm not really sure, like, what that flavor was other than just being really solid. Again, these are all amazing drummers. I'm just ranking them as my favorite. And Wackerman kind of falls victim to being on 2 of the most disappointing tours Frank gave. So anyways, number 6, Chad Wackerman. Best name of any drummer, though. We're going to have to acknowledge that. So. Number 5, Ralph Humphrey. He played with Frank in 73, and then half of 74. He was part of the two drummers of late 73, early 74 with Chester Thompson. And I'm not saying I wasn't a fan of Humphrey, but he was kind of like a Wackerman to me for a while, and that I wasn't really sure what his personality was, other than he was competent, he was playing these songs fantastic, but I wasn't really sure what extra flavor he was adding. But recently I reviewed all the tours Frank did, and listening to those shows more closely and like paying attention to them, like with the purpose of reviewing them, like Humphrey, he is probably the most like, if Frank wants you to play a phrase, Humphrey is going to play that phrase perfectly every single time. Like, he is probably the most reliable. He hits the drums hard. He's reliable. He's there. He's doing exactly what you want. He is not funky in any way, shape, or form. He has a very stiff feel about him. And for a while, I don't think I liked that, because you take a song like Dupree's Paradise in this era, which would open up with George on the keyboards, just kind of improvising stuff, and it would usually go into a jam. Once Chester got there, those jams were super, super funky, and I prefer those. But going back and visiting like the earlier 73 tours, they still go into jams, but the jams are all like almost King Crimson-ish or Con-esque, where they're very like herky-jerky and somewhat robotic, and like there's a funk to them, but it's a really like awkward funk to them. And so Humphrey's got some skills and he's got some interesting flavors that he contributes, but there's a rigidity to it that just flavors, I don't know, there's just a rigidity to it that it took me a while to like come around to and like recognize and be like, okay, I can get behind this. This is pretty ridiculous. So yeah, another absolutely ridiculous drummer. Plays drums on Camarilla Brillo, which is one of the greatest drum tracks. Just the drums on that are absolutely phenomenal. So that alone, that studio track alone elevates him to great heights. But yeah, no, man. Yeah, really, really, really solid drummer that I think might be underappreciated. I probably still underappreciated him by ranking him at number 5. But yeah, 5, Ralph Humphrey. Number 4, Aynsley Dunbar, the drummer back in 70, 71. If you've ever heard like actual live tapes from this, maybe not the official releases though, the Mother's 1970 kind of bears this out a little bit. 71 was a little better balanced, but he like dominates the sound of this band. Like, if you have any sort of audience bootleg or anything, like, you hear Aynsley. He is so present. But he's great. Like, he's a phenomenal drummer. Listen to something like Pound for a Brown on the Bus. I think the Pound for a Brown's from this era, and the way Dunbar just plays those grooves, it's just one of the most like ridiculously at the same time, like, I don't know, it's fantastic. He is kind of has a little bit of Vinnie Colaiuta all over the place, frantic energy, but I think he's a much more contained and much more purposeful than Colaiuta. Colaiuta sounds completely unhinged at times. I think Dunbar always sounds like he's in control, ridiculously talented. Worked very well in this band because Frank was writing all of his groupie material. Apparently Dunbar was incredibly popular with all the groupies. So they were able to play in. They used him in a lot of songs. You hear him referenced a lot. Little House I Used to Live in, Aynsley Dunbar, ladies and gentlemen. He plays that awesome little drum break. But yeah, a ridiculously talented drummer. Would then play on, I think, his work on Waka Jawaka. No, on the Grand Wazoo. On that title track, his drumming on that title track is definitely one of my favorite things ever. But yeah, a ridiculous drummer, live or in the studio. He has been in many other things in his career. But yeah, a lot of power, but purposeful power. And he brings so much to that band and maybe lifts the material up to the next level and really, like, I'm not going to say redeems the Flo and Eddie era. I've had a complete sort of reevaluation of that era thanks to the 71 release that just came out. But yeah, a ridiculous and invaluable asset to Frank during that Flo and Eddie period. My number 4 favorite, Aynsley Dunbar. Number 3, Vinnie Colaiuta. Yeah, he might be the best drummer Frank ever had, technically, accomplishment-wise, what the rest of the world thinks of his drummers. And he is ridiculous. He is fantastic. I think he also is powerful. Like, but it's interesting. He has many different sort of, like, you listen to a fall 78 tour and it is like aggression, aggression, aggression. You listen to like a fall 80 tour and it's not really aggression as much of it's like Vinny occupies every single empty space the entire time. He is the most manic, ridiculous thing ever. 79, he kind of balances his manicness with more restrainedness. But like the black page in that, it's like a Vinnie Colaiuta solo with the black page just going on underneath it. I would say Frank's best guitar solos of any tour of his career are the ones that were played in 79. That is because of Vinnie Colaiuta. And Arthur Barrow, the bass player. I think they pushed Frank to limits that Frank did not go before and would not go again. I think the peak of Frank's guitar playing career is that 79 tour, that European 79 tour, of which we still don't have a complete show of that. We have a whole bunch of solos from there, including all 3 title tracks on the Shut Up and Play Your Guitar series. I think those are Frank's best solos, and that is because of Colaiuta. But Colaiuta is just like, he is almost like having like a drum machine and you're able to program whatever it is you want played, and he will just play it. The dude is ridiculous. But there are times, the reason he falls to number 3 is there are times when there is just too much Vinny. You're just like, Vinny, man, just restrain yourself. Like eliminate, like you're playing like 80 things every 10 seconds. Eliminate 10 of those. Just give us a little space to breathe. But a ridiculously talented drummer. Makes some seal sounds, so he gets credit for that. Yeah. Vinnie Colaiuta, my number 3. Probably Frank's technically best drummer. I understand that. But sometimes he can be a little too much. Yeah, and I also saw him, he also played with Sting. I think I saw him play with Sting a couple times. And other people probably, and just never realized it. But anyways, number 3, Vinnie Colaiuta. Number 2, Terry Ted Bozzio. The devil himself. His thunder rolls, man, those fills and like Zoot Allures in like 76, just ridiculous. His manicness. The way he supports Frank in songs like Torture Never Stops, where he like just gives Frank all this space and then he kind of tightens it up and builds some tension and then gives Frank all this space again. He is probably Frank's most like straightforward rock and roll drummer, but he pushed Frank to some of his, some great heights, those Torture solos, Yo Mama solos, just almost those wild love solos in 77, fall 77, winter 78, Bozzio's last 2 tours, just absolutely some ridiculous drumming. Obviously incredibly talented. Frank wrote the black page for him to challenge him. But he also had a personality. There were songs about Terry Ted. He got to sing songs. He got to interact with Frank and, be the devil and improvise lines in songs. Like he very much completely changed like yes, I would say he's probably responsible for Frank going in that sort of arena rock direction in like 76 and 77, because Terry Ted is an amazing arena rock drummer. He's big, he's loud, he's dynamic, he fills space, but at the same time, he's pushing Frank, and he's really good at like building tension and building momentum and just like keeping like the energy going so that Frank can like ride that and like not necessarily peak in like a volcano solo sense where it's predictable, but at the same time just allow Frank to take that building energy and turn it into something ridiculously magnificent. Colaiuta, on the other hand, is just all over the place that like he doesn't really push Frank to like heights as much as he pushes him to entirely new areas to explore. And then the drummer that's number 1 on this list, I don't know what he does to Frank, but it just creates all kinds of weird, chaotic moments. But anyways, yeah. So Bozzio, you just can't deny his all-around utter importance to Frank. Like, I would even say that if like this was not my favorite, but was like the drummers that had the most impact on Frank's music, I would say it might be Bozzio. I would say Bozzio as a drummer probably did more in this era than maybe other drummers did in other eras. Maybe, arguably, I don't know. Anyways, but yeah, my number 2, Terry Ted. Yeah, that cute little drummer. Number 1, my favorite drummer from my favorite era, Chester Thompson. I just, I love he's got a full sound. He's got a funk. He knows how to lay down the funk. Just listen to those Dupree's Paradise, the George section when they go into those jams. Um, his support during Frank's solos are just, I don't even know what Chester's doing half the time. It's like, listen to Montana, listen to like, especially as we get into fall 74 and like Frank just starts going off in weird directions and Chester's like, it's almost like he completely loses the rhythm and he does these weird fills that like trail off and then it's almost like things fall apart and then he's got to come back and like reestablish it. Like it's, I don't know if Frank was encouraging him to like go in these weird little breakdowns or if he was just having a hard time like figuring out what Frank wanted. So we had these weird awkward pauses, but there were so many moments in Montana's, in More Trouble Every Days, and some redunzals throughout the fall 74, where it's just like, the solos just go weird places and it's almost just because the rhythm section seems to be falling apart, but Frank never seems to be upset about it. It seems to be purposeful. Listen to Montana. I think the perfect example of this is the Montana on You Can't Do That on Stage Volume 2. The way that just sort of like, I don't even know what happens. It just kind of falls apart at the end. But that's kind of the way Chester supported Frank. Even in Stinkfoots, there were like these things where it just kind of fell apart. Very interesting. Always just, okay, what is going to happen now? He was part of the 2-drummer format with Ralph Humphrey, like the end of 73, early 74, which sounded phenomenal. Like the two of them together was just perfect. It kind of hindered sort of the jams and where Frank went with the solos, I think, because it limited what the 2 drummers could do with Frank. But the sound of the actual songs was ridiculously amazing. Yeah, and so Chester Thompson. He also later would be in Genesis. When he joined Genesis, when they started doing what song? Afterglow. At the end of Afterglow, they would add the intro to More Trouble Every Day, that drum line as they faded out the song, which is a nice little another Zappa connection with Genesis. Oh my God, I did not actually think about that until right now. I knew Thompson was in the band, but I forgot they actually referenced that. More Trouble Every Day. But anyways, yeah, so that's it. That's my ranking. That's the way I like it. Chester Thompson is my favorite drummer. You probably could have guessed that if you'd watched my other videos. But yeah, they're all fantastic. And only one of them murdered his mom. So that's a good thing. So anyways, yeah, let me know why I'm wrong, why I'm right, who I should listen to with more attention and have a better opinion of. Comment, subscribe. Like, you know how all this works. I got to do something about that hair, man, because it's really bothering me. Like, it's crazy, man. It's what happens when you let kindergarten kids cut your hair, people. They don't always do a good job. They don't. You can't trust them. They're not trained. But anyways, thanks for watching, and that's it for today. Peace, y'all, and I will talk to you later. Bye.